Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. Today we're going to be talking about the denouement. So in our last video we talked about prologues, now we're going to be talking about the denouement. Now the denouement isn't necessarily the opposite of the prologue, that would be the epilogue, but the prologue comes at the beginning of the story, the denouement comes at the end. The denouement is the final closing scene or scenes of a story. It's kind of like a sigh of relief at the end, and it's the last stage of Freytag's pyramid. It comes after the falling action, so the way that the end is structured is you have the book's climax, which is kind of the moment of highest tension in the story. It's where the main goal of the story is either going to be achieved or not achieved, and we'll get resolution to that main problem. Then there's the falling action, which is the immediate fallout from the book's climax. And then there's the denouement, which is just a final pause or moment at the end. There's usually not a lot of tension. The conflict is pretty much over, whether for better or for worse for the characters. And the denouement is just there to provide a final degree of resolution to the reader. The denouement differs from an epilogue in that an epilogue caps off the story by providing insight into the characters' lives, usually sometime after the story has ended. So we get to see how the events of the story have affected them long term. The denouement is just a calm moment after the falling action, but it's not separated by any kind of time skip. Not all books have a denouement. Many end a bit more abruptly, right at the end of the falling action, and in some books the denouement might be very short. So let's talk about how to write the denouement. Now the first thing you want to do is ask yourself what you've set up, because this is your final chance to follow up on the promises that you've made throughout the story. You've probably heard of Chekhov's gun. If you haven't, we've got an entire video on that you can check out, but it's the idea that if you show the reader that something is significant, it needs to pay off later. Now you don't want to just dump exposition to try and wrap up all the loose ends, but this is a great place to kind of take stock of all the questions you've opened in your story and ask yourself if there are any promises you haven't followed through on. Now, of course, the main promises of the story are probably addressed in the book's climax, but sometimes there are extra little threads that we're left wondering about, and the denouement is the best place to address them. If you have so much unanswered that it can't fit into the denouement, it's also a great time to maybe go back and do some pruning and get rid of excess story elements that aren't really serving the story. You don't have to answer everything, but if you have any unfired Chekhov guns, so things that you really promised would be significant but then haven't been followed up on, now is probably the time to give some kind of resolution there. As a related point, tie off most loose ends. It's very rare that a whole novel will tie off every single loose end. In fact, doing so can make it seem like the characters' lives don't continue beyond the end of the book. It's okay to leave a few things unanswered, though you probably want to answer most of the loose ends in your story so your book doesn't feel unfinished. It's okay to leave a few things up to the reader's interpretation. The next thing you can do in the denouement is reflect on the theme. In many fables, this is where the story would actually just state the moral. And now, of course, you don't need to be so overt, but the denouement is a great place to give a final nod to the core theme of your story. If the main theme of your story is the power of friendship, you can reinforce that in the denouement by showing the main character and, the friends they've made along the way, maybe showing that despite their losses, they still have each other. Another really important thing you can do with the denouement, probably one of the most important, is show the effects of the character's arc and journey. Now we probably see the character's ultimate change at the story's climax. This is probably where they make like the final core decision that the entire book was leading up to. But what the denouement can do is show the lasting effects of the character's change and journey. Now that the main conflict is resolved, how have they changed as a person? After everything we've been through, we probably want a sense that they're changed forever in some way. And this is a great place to show that change. How has the events of the story changed them? How are they different from they were in the first scene? You can even do a bit of comparing and contrasting to the very beginning of the story. Now, one thing you don't want to do in the denouement is force events to resolve unnaturally. You really don't want the end to kind of seem like a cop-out. Like you just force the story to resolve so that everything could be tied up nice and neatly, even if it doesn't really make sense. If you need to contrive something in order to resolve it, then maybe this is a plot thread that's better left unsolved, or you need to look earlier in your story and see how you can set up that resolution earlier. Don't view the denouement as kind of like a last-ditch effort to tie up the conflict. If you need to do that, the problem is probably rooted a bit earlier in the story. One thing you really want to do in the denouement is to show and not tell. Yes, it's this old beast. You can never escape it. If you're gonna be a writer, you'll never be able to escape show don't tell. It's going to follow you everywhere you go. and it's appeared in this video. Most novels should not end with a long speech where everything explained, even though this is how Shakespeare usually handled the denouement in his plays. We have come a long way since then. You want to show the resolution rather than having it explained. So if at the end of the story the character is a changed person, don't have them sit down and say, and this is how I changed as a person. We want to actually see that through a final scene, through a final moment. Show them interacting with other characters, show how they're different and how they've changed, rather than just telling us. If you feel like you need some brushing up on your show don't tell skills, we've got a video on the topic. We also have an entire course on show don't tell that you can check out. I'll leave that in the description. It is probably one of the most useful skills that you can learn as a writer. It's always worth doing a bit of extra work to kind of exercise that specific writing muscle. And finally, one great thing you can do with the denouement is release the tension of the story. If anything, this is the primary purpose of the denouement. That's why it's there. That's what it kind of can do that the falling action can't, since the falling action usually still has a fair amount of tension as we're dealing with the aftermath of the book's climax. The reader has been on board with the story's tension the entire time. This is the chance to release some of that by having a calm moment before the story ends. If you want the reader to be able to kind of take a sigh of relief and spend a final moment with the character before the story ends, you can do that in the denouement. If you end before the denouement and you don't have one, the story will still end at a point where there's still a lot of tension in the story and the reader won't really be able to let that go. Maybe that's what you want, but if you do want your book to end on a point of calm, kind of the reader can just like take a sigh of relief, this is the place to do that. By just having a calm moment, not a lot of tension, showing the aftermath of the story. It doesn't need to be a long beat. In fact, it should probably be fairly short. Probably you don't even need a full chapter of denouement. Probably it can only be one scene, but if you want that just calm moment with the characters, then this is the place to do that. So that is how to write the denouement. Thank you guys so much for watching. We have now reached the denouement of this video. So I guess I will wrap up some loose ends by saying thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time, bye.